You wouldn't think that mud could have a value, but now it does. And this opens up a whole range of new mechanisms to finance conservation actions. In this episode, I talk about mangroves with Doctors Valeria Hagger and Professor Cath Lovelock, both of the University of Queensland, and they'll speak about the new blue carbon method, which enables us to value lots of these coastal ecosystems that capture a lot of carbon through their mud.
Well, blue carbon is, it's got a lot of potential. So blue carbon is in the mud, but also in the biomass of mangroves and salt marshes and seagrasses. And in Australia, we even count what we call the supratidal forest, so things like melaleuca and casuarina. And what we're hoping is that the science that we've done, which is accumulate all of the data that we have in Australia on the carbon stocks in the mud and the carbon stocks in the trees and the other plant material, and how much they sequester carbon over time, to basically put a value on how much carbon is stored in these ecosystems. So we hope with that it's going to lead to restoration. So, it's interesting, isn't it, like how much opportunity we might have in Australia to fix more carbon in restoring coastal wetlands and avoid greenhouse gas emissions. But it's not an easy, necessarily an easy thing to achieve. Right?
No.
So the blue carbon method, it came from decades of scientific work that assembled all of the data needed to understand exactly how much carbon was in coastal wetlands and how much carbon they sequester, as well as what those emissions are from, the other land uses that they're now, have replaced those coastal ecosystems. Mm-hmm. So, armed with all of that data, the scientists were able to help the government to develop like a recipe for measuring and quantifying how much carbon is in the landscape if there's a restoration project, right? And so that building that recipe means that there's a sort of a standard procedure that people who want to do restoration can follow to monetize the value of their restoration. Mm. But it's not only about carbon, right? It's also about biodiversity. Mm. Also, restored coastal wetlands are really important for improving water quality, and that is so important for the Great Barrier Reef. Yeah. And so my hope for implementation of the blue carbon method and blue carbon projects is that we're going to have basically healthier coastal ecosystems that are great for Great Barrier Reef. They're going to be good for adjacent seagrass. They're going to be, really fantastic for all of the coastal ecosystems, as well as providing things like protection for the land uses behind. So protection for productive coastal agriculture with big storms. So what's your hope for that?
Oh, my hope. Well, I think it's wonderful that we now have an incentive, a monetary incentive for people to do restoration. And there's a lot of big investors out there who are interested, but they're not just interested in the carbon, they're interested in the co-benefits as well. So they're willing to pay, a higher value, a premium price to get projects which not only do their fundamental carbon sequestration, but also achieve those biodiversity and water quality. So if we can, now sort of, move on from that and develop methods to quantify these other co-benefits, then it makes, restoration much more viable across Australia.
Blue carbon method, I also am really hopeful that we can develop something in the future. Well, we can develop something even now that is really useful for Indigenous communities to get really involved in managing their coastal wetlands and get the financial benefit from doing so, to really add to the social benefits of blue carbon projects.
Yeah. So the blue carbon method has had policy impact, being adopted by the Australian government. So what's your advice for early career researchers to enable their research to have policy impact?
I think not all research actually has policy implications, but if you're a person who's an early career researcher who wants to influence, or wants your research to influence policy, then really the best thing you can do is get involved, right? So that sounds funny, but get involved with people who are on the forefront of influencing policy, environmental policy. So I'm talking environment, but of course this could happen over health, over social science, over biomedical science. So, really you have to try and understand where your science fits within the policy landscape and then step up and get involved. Don't wait to be invited, I think. It's like, in many ways you have to make your own pathway into this, but you should be able to identify the key people who are influencing policy and then, talk to them and try and plot a path so that you can contribute to impact.
So that was Dr. Valeria Hagger and Professor Cath Lovelock talking about Australia's new blue carbon method. And this is going to enable funding for restoration of coastal ecosystems across Australia through allowing them to sell credits on the carbon market. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please check out more of our episode on the Conservation Hackers channel, and please share us with your friends and family. It's the number one way we can spread the word about our video blog. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you'd like to hear more from us on YouTube. Thanks so much for listening today.